What is up, everyone? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, and I'm bringing you guys something a little bit different today. So since Link VRAINS Pack 3 was just announced, there are a bunch of different archetypes that could possibly be receiving a new Link monster. And something that I really enjoy is going back, looking through different archetypes that have come out, and seeing what decks could really use a new Link monster, look at what types of things a good Link monster for that archetype would do, and see what cards would go up in price if a Link monster were to be announced. So for example, when Isolde the Noble Knight Link monster was first announced, in Link VRAINS Pack 1, we saw a bunch of Noble Knight cards get bought out. So we saw cards like Madrout and Dristan jump up in price significantly. Obviously, Isolde was utilized in like decks outside of Noble Knight, so it saw play in Goki and then Dark Warriors. But the fact that the archetype was receiving a Link monster was enough to cause like a lot of movement in the market. And that's effectively what I want to do here. So what I'm going to do in this video is talk a bit about Majespecters, which I think are very likely to get a Link monster very soon. And I'm going to talk a bit about the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, as well as discuss a few different external archetypes and support that could be added into the deck. Then we're going to take a look at what I think a Majespecter Link monster would look like that would benefit the archetype. And then finally, we're going to look at a few different cards that I think should be picked up now, given how likely it is that a Majespecter Link monster is going to be coming out, and how that would adapt to the current meta. So yeah, as I said, this is a new type of video that I kind of wanted to try out with you guys. I'd love to go through this with like a lot of different archetypes, because it feels like we're always receiving new legacy support for different things. And this video was actually a lot of fun for me to make, because I got to go back and really look in depth at an older archetype that maybe a lot of newer players aren't so familiar with. So yeah, if this is something that you guys enjoy, then leave me a thumbs up, but then at the same time also feel free to dislike the video if you guys didn't like the video, or you want me to stay away from this type of content. But yeah, let's get started. Okay, so to start off with, let's quickly look at the main decked Majespecter monsters. One of the key traits of Majespecters is that they cannot be destroyed or targeted by your opponent's card effects. And this is a pretty big deal, because it means that they're unaffected by cards like Effect Veiler, or Widow Anchor, or Infinite Impermanence, which are pretty dominant cards in the meta today, which is good because the archetype is full of Stratoses. Almost everything in the main deck searches for something else when normal or special summoned. Buku searching for monsters, QB searching for traps, and Yada searching for spells. However, each of these effects is a hard once per turn, and also for the most part, these main deck monsters are pretty weak with the exception of Unicorn, which we're going to discuss later on. And one of the key aspects of the deck is that these monsters are attributed for the effects of the spells and traps. And under Master Rule 3, this was okay, because you could Pendulum summon the monsters back really easily. However, with Master Rule 4, that is a lot harder, because after they're attributed, you have to have Link arrows pointing and opening up extra deck monster zones in order for you to Pendulum summon back a bunch of these Majespecter monsters. So that is a bit more difficult. The other downside is that these monsters, they have no effects when they're in the Pendulum scales. They're effectively just zeros. You can Pendulum summon out monsters using them as scales, but you don't really get any value from them. You're better off special summoning them. That means that you're probably better off utilizing other Pendulum cards in your scales. Okay, so next up we have the Majespecter Spells and Traps. These are actually some really powerful cards, and they are all searchable by something in the deck, which is really cool. The deck can search for spells or traps, so you can search for some spot removal in the spells going second, or you can set up your back row if you are going first. Like, the big problem is that they do require you to tribute a wind spellcaster in order to activate them. So if your opponent is able to remove them from the field, or if you link summon or overlay with them, you can't really use the Majespecter Spells and Traps unless you summon them back. So yeah, as I mentioned before, right, like, it is more difficult under Master Rule 4 to flood the field as easily as before. So using these cards can be difficult. However, it's definitely possible to set up very strong boards that are really difficult for your opponent to break through. Okay, so now we're going to look at some cards that are able to support the Majespecter archetype. So the big obvious thing here is that Majespecters are a Pendulum based deck, so they have access to all of the different Pendulum support that's out. So we have cards like Electromite, which is an obvious choice here that can help speed up the deck. We also have cards like Abyss Actor Curtain Raiser, Chronograph Sorcerer, and Mythical Beast Master Cerberus that would help to put bodies on the field in order to make these link plays with. We also have to remember that Majespecters don't have any conditions on them, right? So like before, Clifforts would only let you summon Klee monsters. But Majespecters don't have that restriction, so you can splash these other archetypes in with them, which is great. The other part is Guard Dragons, which seem to be seeing play in like almost everything. Luster Pendulum is a card that just went to 3 and could definitely help Majespecters flood the extra deck so that they can be Pendulum summoned out later. And then also it's a dragon, so you can special summon it out and then turn it into Elpie, which is great. It lets you bring out Destrudo from the deck, and Destrudo is another great card. It synergizes really well with the deck's level 3 and 4 monsters, allowing you to make level 7 or 8 synchro plays like FA Dawn Dragster or Borreload Savage Dragon, both of which are really strong cards right now. So as far as other archetypes that could be played with the deck, Witchcrafts are a newer engine that could be interesting. The new card from Rising Rampage, Witchcrafter Golem Aruru, works as pretty good like generic spellcaster support that could help the deck's problem with small monsters and put like a big body onto the board. And then also like the Witchcrafter engine as a whole could help give the deck a sense of recovery after its back row has been used. And the Witchcrafter cards are like mostly cheap. Witchcrafter Creation is like a Rhoda, and that's the main one that you'd play that's going to be like expensive. It's currently sitting at around $20. The other Infinity Chasers secret rare that's worth a bit more is Madame Vert, which is currently about $15. Golem Aruru is a newer secret rare from the most recent set. But I don't really see any spellcaster decks running around the meta right now, so I don't think it's gonna be very expensive. I mean, like, when I'm talking about Witchcrafter here, I'm not suggesting that this is an archetype or engine that you should go and pick up right now or anything. I think it's still a little bit overpriced. I'm just taking into consideration how the archetype could be utilized with Majespecters. And yeah, I think Witchcrafters would make a pretty interesting engine there. The other archetype to utilize would be Wind Witches. So I believe that the Wind Witches were played with Majespecters a little bit when they first came out, because like these are also wind spellcasters, but the deck never was really great. It never picked up a lot of traction. These cards, like, they grant you access to like a free indestructible kind of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. It lets you put up like a really free negate with a big body. It doesn't necessarily use up your normal summon. And at worst, like, they're wind spellcasters as well, so you can tribute them for the Majespecter spells or traps, or you can link with them and do other things. Also, these cards are like super cheap. You can get commons of like Snow and Glass Spell, and then you can get secret rare ice spells from Shadows in Valhalla, and like to get 3 of everything shouldn't cost you more than like maybe $5. It's definitely like a cute engine, and it's something that I'd hold on to regardless of how little play it's seeing at the moment. But yeah, this is another archetype to like take into consideration here. Alright, so one of the big questions that would seriously affect whether or not Majespecters could be viable with a new Link monster is whether or not Kirin comes off the ban list. This card was limited in August of 2016 and then banned in March of 2017. And for those of you who weren't playing back then, this card was absolutely ridiculous. You could summon it like basically for free every turn. It's immune to targeting, it's immune to destruction, and if you tried to run over it, it just bounced your monster back to the hand. The question though here is the card still broken or ban worthy in today's metagame? Because like, I think that absolutely the card would be really, really strong in today's format. You could set up a lot of really hard to deal with turn 1 boards with its immunities, and even cards that can answer it would probably be bounced back anyways. It does give Pendulums like a huge boost, because like Pendulums are pretty frail decks. Since disruption at like just the right time or in the right way at the right pressure point can cause the deck to like completely fall apart. So this card could help to remedy that. That being said, I don't know if we're ready to see this card back yet. Like, part of me thinks that me and like maybe other people were just like over exaggerating how good the card was, because like at the time it like single-handedly decided certain games. But at the same time, like, we play a much faster paced game now. We can set up so many more broken boards that this card isn't necessarily gonna break anything. And ultimately, like, it's up to Konami to decide if we're gonna get this card back. So good luck, who knows? Alright, so I was thinking about what I would want a Majespecter Link monster to look like. And so right off the bat, I had two primary concerns. One, I wanted the card not to just be another broken Pendulum support Link monster the way that Electromite was, but the other thing was that I wanted to help the Archetype to speed up, to be able to flood the field a little bit more in the way that it was under Master Rule 3 and still be able to function. So what I would do, I would make it a Link 2 monster requiring 2 monsters, including at least 1 Majespecter monster. The Majespecter monster requirement being in there to stop it from just being like a generic Pendulum monster. It'd be a wind spellcaster just like the rest of the Archetype, and I made it 1800 attack points. I didn't want it to be as strong as Kirin. And then as a Majespecter monster, I had to make it so that it couldn't be destroyed or targeted by your opponent's card effects. So anything over 2000 was just like begging for trouble. So we stuck at 1800. The next part I kind of took from like the effect of Psyframe Lord Lambda, and that's that you can activate Majespecter spells and traps without tributing a wind spellcaster monster. And I think that this is really important because it would allow you to utilize the Majespecter monsters and summon them out and get the searches and get value out of them, and then still utilize the Majespecter monsters to make Exceed plays or Link plays or Synchro plays or whatever strategy you want to use. And those searches like aren't dead, right? You still have value from them because you can still activate them. And like this can still be played around, right? Like the deck would still be susceptible to something like Gameciel, where your opponent could kaiju the Majespecter Link monster, but then you could like outplay your opponent by leaving a Majespecter monster on board other than the Link, in which case something like Gameciel would be underwhelming. So it adds that like little bit of a back and forth there. And then the other thing that I wanted to do was accelerate the deck a little bit better. So I gave it another effect where you get to take a Majespecter from your deck and place it face up in your extra deck, and then special summon a level 4 or lower Majespecter monster from your face up extra deck. This lets you to get that extra summon, which results in a search that Majespecters really need and depend on in order to play, and it should help the consistency of the deck a lot. Also, I required that the monster be level 4 or lower because I don't want the Archetype to just be turbo out Kirin deck if Kirin were to be unbanned. Alright, so now we're going to look at some cards that I would look into picking up in anticipation for a Majespecter Link monster. Remember, we don't know if this Archetype is going to get a Link monster at all, but with so many different Archetypes receiving Legacy support recently, I think that it's always a good idea to look at the key cards in these older Archetypes and have an idea of what to pick up and what would go up if a Link monster were to come out. So one of those cards is Buku, which is the main Stratos of the deck. It searches for any monster, which in turn grants you access to any spell or trap through Kyuubi or Yada. It's definitely like the main starter card for the Archetype because it can also fetch you a missing scale in order to conduct a Pendulum summon. So yeah, this is definitely a really key card, and this card's actually really cheap because I think no one's really thinking about Majespecters. We're talking like $1 for any copy of the card, right? It has 2 printings, the original in Dimension of Chaos, and then the second one in the Megaton from that year. If you can, I would definitely recommend getting like a set of the first ed original prints, because if we were to get new support, those are always what tends to bounce up the highest in terms of value. So the next card here is Totem Bird. This card is a monster that you can make pretty easily in Majespecter since it just requires 2 level 3 wind monsters to make, and it's a negate, so you can detach its 2 materials to negate a spell or trap card. This card's pretty cheap, it's only like $1 or so. It has prints in Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy and the Megaton from that year. The card was actually used a bit before. It was played in Zodiac when you could make it with a Terror Top and Take Tomborg if you already had access to Ratpier and you didn't need to make Invoker. That being said, the card never reached like a ridiculously high price point, being at most maybe like $5 or so. But now seeing that it's a bit like of an older Secret Rare and it only has those 2 printings, it's definitely something that I'd pick up now rather than struggling to find a copy of later on. And finally, we have Majesties Pegasus, which is the Majespecter field spell. This card's pretty good. It lets you pop your Majespecter monster to special summon a different one from the deck, which is important because the extra summon means that you get off an extra search. This card actually wasn't played too much before. It was kind of cute, but most of the time you were better off just playing other Pendulum monsters. You really just played like the 3 copies of Buku and the 1 copy of Kirin because of how broken Kirin was. And you played a bunch of other different Pendulum cards. If you tried playing the field spell and the other Majespecter monsters, it meant that the spells and traps were really just bricks, and they really hurt the consistency of those Pendulum decks, so they weren't really played too much. However, if we do see Majespecters get a Link monster and the deck does become a viable archetype, I am very sure that Majesties Pegasus is a card that would get bought out. Currently it's only 50 cents, but it only has 1 original printing. It wasn't included in the Megatins and it hasn't been reprinted since then. Cards with only 1 printing tend to be prime targets for buyouts, since there generally won't be a very high quantity on the market and they can go overlooked pretty easily. This has actually been a pretty consistent trend in the Yu-Gi-Oh market, right? Like, for example, we've seen price jumps in something like Fortune's Future for Fortune Ladies, or Aromage Jasmine when the Aromage Link monster was announced to be coming out before Aromage Jasmine was confirmed to be reprinted in Dual Power. Or like something recent, now that Psyframe Lord Lambda is out, we've seen Psyframe Gear Beta jumping up in price like just a little bit. It's been creeping up steadily over time. Obviously this is just like my own speculation and one way that I kind of look at card trends, but the pattern in the market behavior is there. So other than that, there's not too much to look at in terms of Majespecter buyout targets. A lot of the cards actually came in pretty low rarities, so the whole core should actually be really cheap for you guys to pick up. But if you are able to, I think that this is a deck core that you should definitely grab and hold onto for a little while. Anyways, guys, that's it for this episode. Hopefully you guys found it interesting. With so many different archetypes always getting legacy support, I think it's really important to look back at some of these older archetypes and make educated decisions about how new support for an older archetype could affect that archetype and how the market would react as a result. Like the last year even, we've seen a lot of different support for older archetypes where we're not really expecting it, like archetypes like Yosenju or Charmers or even Cloudians. And Yu-Gi-Oh is really like a game where anything can happen, so it always helps to be that like extra bit vigilant. So yeah, thanks guys so much for watching. If you've managed to stick around this far, do let me know what you guys think of this type of video, and if you want to see more content like this in the future. It's a bit different from the types of videos that I usually do or that Tombox usually does. It's a lot more speculative than it is reactive. But yeah, be sure to give a comment down below and let me know what you guys think, and be sure to give me that thumbs up or thumbs down feedback. I'd really appreciate it. And of course, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so that you guys see everything that Tombox and I have to bring for you guys. Yeah, and of course, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.